Okay, so picking up where we left off here, we can see that there is food shortages and lack of diet diversity that leads to this undernutrition. And again, it can impact the overall health of a population because of greater infection prevalence, as well as greater unnecessary disease, morbidity, and mortality. Because remember, nutrition is the foundation for reducing susceptibility to many chronic and infectious diseases. And so with the proper nutrient balance in our body, we can overcome many things that we are exposed to. One of the keys to understanding micronutrient malnutrition is nutritional monitoring. And we can do this through several ways. We do this through surveys, which helps for food policy development. And we can also do this through blood serum levels to check for which foods we should fortify. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that in the next segment. So this ends, guys, the first lecture that I had posted for you all, the first half. So we'll take a quiz on this first half material on Monday. We're not going to take that tomorrow, but I am going to go ahead and continue forward with the lecture. So I'm going to begin starting with the second one that I have posted for you, so we can just continue to go forward with content. Okay, so you will have a quiz on Monday on this first packet, and we're going to go ahead and get started with the second packet on nutrition. So let's talk a little bit about critical influences that result in food choices. Okay, there's several factors that determine our choice of food, and the first one that we want to kind of take a look at is environment. One of the first things we want to ask ourselves is, in our environment, what foods can we produce? How do we produce it? And are they convenient? What foods are convenient? Can we store them well? And then the cost effectiveness or affordability of the foods. So one of the things that we have to ask in the United States in particular is, what is the potential of what we could produce? And we have the potential to really produce lots of food and have a lot of available foods for us for two reasons. One, we have the ability to have grocery stores and convenience stores and food markets, farmers markets. We have the ability to possibly have our own personal gardens in many cases, or even greenhouses in our backyards. We have refrigerators that allow us to store our fruits and vegetables, and we also can do things like freezing and canning in order to be able to store them well. The challenge that we have with a lot of individuals is that it's not so much that we don't have these foods available. It has a lot to do with more individuals' perception of cost, and really it's the cost of time. When you look at the cost of healthy, nutritious foods, many people argue that it is more expensive. The most recent meta-analysis that I found, and I will try to get this article posted for you all, found that the cost of a healthy diet is only about $1 more than a processed food diet, if you will. And in fact, if someone eats out several times a day and adds that up over the week versus pre-planning their meals, eating the meals that they bought, only purchasing the foods that they need for those meals, they will find that they actually eat it costs less and is more healthy in the long run. The other issue with cost is the idea of it might cost $1 more now, but it's going to cost significantly less in the future because we are going to have less health concerns that need healthcare utilization. The problem with that is the immediate gratification versus the long-term reward, and the fact that people aren't 100% sure that they're going to get that reward long-term, because there have been people in their lives that have eaten super healthy their whole life and still get something like cancer. But we do know that those individuals end up faring better in their cancer treatment and survive longer because they were healthier going into the onset. So yes, there's no perfect formula for preventing disease, but this definitely increases the likelihood of preventing disease. So the big issues with cost effectiveness and affordability is really more perception. And when you really work to interview individuals, it's less so much the cost as it is the convenience. it is more costly to them to eat healthy because of the time it takes to plan meals, go to the grocery store, and prepare them. And for some individuals, they're not sure how to prepare them, which then now takes research, again, time that we often don't have in our American culture of life. So the environment that we live will ultimately determine our food choices. In the freedom of America, we have the opportunity to eat from any really wide range of sources, and we often choose those sources to become those that are most convenient because of the overall lifestyle that we live. Bioavailability is the quantity of vitamins provided by the food itself and the amount of vitamins absorbed and used by the body. So this is going to be looking at both farming practices and the variety and diversity of one's diet, because that will determine their ability to actually have nutrient-dense foods and be able to consume those. One other point about environment that I think is important is one thing that we can do in our country, whether you're urban or rural, is really work with individuals to increase their accessibility to healthy food choices at a lower cost. The city of Pittsburgh has done a really great job of doing this. The Carnegie Mellon libraries, the Carnegie Library system has worked to, all over the city, has worked to create community gardens in each of the communities that the library is involved in. It's funded through the libraries, through the grant funding from Andrew Carnegie, but it is utilized and done by the individuals in that community themselves. So they each get to basically help to plant and harvest, and there could be some education around how to use those vegetables that they harvest in cooking demonstrations. We also have something there called food trucks that go around to some of the lower income neighborhoods, and it's a farmers market food truck. And then there's also farmers markets that have been made available in pretty much every community around Pittsburgh at one day of the week in order to receive low-cost fruits and vegetables. And I will tell you, they are pretty awesome. I was quite surprised moving to a rural area how difficult it was to find a farmer's market to get a lower-cost food. Many rural areas, individuals have their own gardens because they have that ability to do that, and or they have close proximity to farmers that they can purchase directly from them through CSAs. CSAs are community supported agricultural programs. It's basically saying you're going to buy a share into the farm. You're basically saying, I'm going to pay you this fee to farm these vegetables for me, and at the end of each month I'll get a certain, depending on the share that I buy, I will get a certain amount of produce. And you can get quite a bit of food that way, and a lot of times you'll get vegetables in there that you might not know about, have never tried, and a lot of farmers will include recipes on how to use that vegetable, which is kind of a neat aspect to look at. Society also plays a big role in our food choices. One of those things that it looks at is what is accepted cuisine. In other words, what's maybe the cultural preferences of food and what we eat. And so I know this quite well in the United States with a melting pot. You know, we have Polish types of foods, German foods, Italian foods, Chinese food, Japanese food. We've sort of labeled these different cuisines with a certain cultural perspective behind it. You know, we have Indian food that comes out a lot out of the African and Indian populations. We have South African style of food. We have the bayou in our own country types of food. So there's lots of different types of things, French cuisines that have a certain sort of type of food that they offer, the way in which they prepare that food, maybe the types of spices that they use. So one of the things that we need to ask ourselves is, what is the accepted cuisine of our culture? Again, the United States gives us sort of unique perspective because we are a melting pot. We have the ability to sample several foods from several different countries and different cultural backgrounds. But we also have the American cuisine. And if you think about the American cuisine, you're probably thinking hamburgers, French fries. You know, I think of Permane Brothers, which puts coleslaw and French fries on their sandwiches. A lot of hot dogs. You think about sort of the picnics and the fairs, and so pizza. So we're really looking at more high calorie, dense foods, high fat, low nutrient dense foods, convenience foods is kind of our foods of choice. You also want to ask, what are traditional folk remedies or even nutritional beliefs among the culture? What do they believe they should eat or should not eat? For example, in some countries and in some religious beliefs, they don't consume things like certain meats or certain other types of foods because it goes against their religious beliefs. We also want to understand, what does a community consider as appropriate nutrition? Some communities of the world just believe if you can eat whatever it is, as long as you can consume food, that's what's important, where others have a much deeper understanding of the types of foods that they can eat. And then we want to ask ourselves, what's the nutritional messaging that's advertised or targeted in the community? What you can notice in our community, a lot of what is targeted is fast food restaurants, or just any sort of restaurant, convenience foods, processed foods. Many of our children's commercials are sugars, cereals, or snack foods rather than nutritional messaging towards healthy, well-balanced eating. We also want to consider family relationships in terms of how does that develop one's system of choosing foods. We know that the family unit is one of the strongest influencers on any health-related choice that we have. And so our family relationship, our family and our closest friend relationship will often determine what chews we will eat, what foods we're used to eating, the time of day we're going to eat, how we combine foods to build meals. Are we eating on the go or sitting at the table? And of course, the types of foods, So I grew up with sort of a more rural kind of American type of cuisine where there wasn't significant amount of spice. It was sort of a meat, potatoes, veggie kind of thing. We ate 3 meals, had small snacks, but it was largely fruits and vegetables, things we grew in our garden. Kind of well balanced, sort of that balancing type of an act there. Others may have richer foods. We ate at 5:30. We sat at the table. Every time we ate, some people would eat on the go, eat at 8 o'clock at night. There's various ways in which your family or your friend relationships have actually molded the way in which you see foods and consume and try foods. Now, obviously, if you're one that moves to several different areas, for example, I went to Florida State for undergrad, so I got to be exposed to a lot of different Southern cuisines that really helped open up my idea of what results in food, and so there's greater variety in my diet today. I also worked on a project during my early career where I helped create a child obesity prevention program for Latino families in Pittsburgh. And so the meals that we prepared for them and the recipes that we worked on to help provide a healthier diet for them still had to fit their cultural cuisine. And so I've learned to really enjoy Latin American style food in that approach as well. So as you expand your family and relationships out, you may increase your cuisine types. For example, my husband is largely from a Polish and German background, and so we've added some of those types of foods into our diet as well. So this may expand over time, but you can understand how those types of social interactions can lead to the way in which you consume food and build food. We also have personal factors, if you think about this, such as different times in your life or seasons of your life, different moods. I mean, I don't know about any of you, but when I'm stressed, the last thing I crave is broccoli. We often crave high-fat, sugary foods. Daily influences around us, maybe our schedules that we keep, or the people that we're with on a day-to-day or timing basis. For example, you may not typically eat a certain cuisine when you're out to dinner, but if everybody chooses that particular place like Thai, you may decide, hey, I want to engage with my friends, so I'm going to go and I'm going to try it, as an example. And then, of course, your own personal preferences or personal palate of food flavor and taste. So I pose a question here to you. Which factor do you think plays the most significant role in food choice? And we'll pick up here when we meet on Friday. But I want you to consider these various factors and understand that we want to eat for enjoyment, but primarily, first of all, we need to eat for nutritional steps.